because it's going to take us a while today to work all through all the issues.
Out in the lobby.
Could you please,
If you want to do further public comment on the dog park, please come inside now and do it.
And if not, please close the doors in the back of the chamber. Thank you.
Tim, would you close the door, please?
Where's the whistle?
All right, we're reconvened. Public hearing is still, if anyone wants to make further comment.
My name is Lynn Tellstrom. I live on Bethel Creek Drive with my partner, Dell. I want to make comment not only on the dog park, but the consequences of the excrement, not only from the dogs, but it also comes from the nature, the birds, the people that moor their boats there. There's a lot of variety of natural functionings there at the park, and it's not just dogs. So let's not blame it on the dogs. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Is there anyone further? I'd like to move on, but if someone has something. Seeing no one further standing up, we will close public hearing. We'll go on to the adoption of the consent agenda. On City Council, do any of you want to pull any particular item? If so.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item D6, please.
All right.
Move to adopt as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes, the item of D6 is salaries of the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Vero Beach and our coastal PBA. I believe that this is important enough not to be hidden under the consent agenda. I'd like to have an open discussion on this item.
Of course, Mrs. Turner.
The proposal that was brought to us, I don't know if I can impose this, Brown. Would you present the proposal that we were voting on?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I do feel I need to get in on the game. I served in the Marine Corps, so now we have all branches covered.
Semper Fi.
The Coast Guard person.
Missing the Coast Guard, aren't we?
I am Merchant Marine.
That'll qualify. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. The city labor negotiation team met with the Coastal Florida PBA to negotiate a resolution to the impasse over wages, which is Article 32 to the collective bargaining agreement. We reached a tentative agreement, which is before the council today for your vote. The basis for the proposal the tentative agreement is as follows. Police officers with 2+ years of service will be given a 2% cost of living increase. I want to make clear that this is not an increase to the step plan. You're familiar that the PBA with the city has a step plan of 1 through 21 based on years of service. This is not an increase to the step plan. It is simply a 2% cost of living adjustment. Additionally, officers with 3+ years of service will move up one step on the pay plan. And I want to make clear that this was a proposal that was brought to the city negotiation team by the PBA. The city negotiators did not devise this plan or create it or think it up. It was brought to us as a proposal by the PBA and by their members in terms of what they wanted to have happen. The city negotiation team did approve that and has brought it to the council for approval. The net increase is 2.5%. To give you raw dollars for this year, that would be $64,333.03. And so, as I said before, the city negotiation team has tentatively approved this and is for council for approval. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Ms. Turner?
Thank you. I think that gives us the detail of the request for us to vote on.
Okay,
and I guess I just wanted to make clear to the public that these are funds that were, if we go forward with this, these will be coming funds from the unallocated budget funds that we had. which were a result of the savings, the cost-cutting measures that the city went through. Although we didn't get to our goal, those were still results. The $227,000 that we have as unallocated budget funds were a result of cost-cutting. This will cut into that as far as having that room for beach renourishment, et cetera.
Yes, ma'am. We do have a line item for not the beach, but the dunes. Dunes. Replenishment, and we do have. It's a small number, and we understand with any major storm, we would obviously have to find funds from another allocation, and that $64,000, just for clarification, includes any overtime, any federal taxes or payments that we make. So that's an all-inclusive number that we feel very comfortable with in making this recommendation.
And it has been 4 years since we've had any cost increase for the PBA, correct?
That is correct. This would have been the 5th year.
Will this result in final agreement? And maybe I should ask Jason.
Yes, sir, it would. This was the only issue at impasse between.
Sorry, thank you. I just want the public to be able to. Yes.
Sorry. Yes, Mr. Winger. This would resolve all issues with the police PBA. There was only one issue at impasse, and that was wages.
I'd just like to say, I guess the way that the PBA presented these raises, I mean, I still have concern that what we're doing is we're continuing to increase that disparity of our incoming officers, their pay disparity against other competing options. So when they chose not to give any of this pay increase to newly hired officers.
Like I said, I'm not part of their negotiation side, of course, but they presented the proposal. They presented the proposal to us. It met our parameters in terms of cost and what we were comfortable bringing to council for approval. So we felt, we're not going to tell them, how they feel they need to maybe divide up raises this go around, but the the starting pay issue is something that we'll address, at a later time.
I agree with Mrs. Turner, but with that said, I would entertain a motion to approve this.
Mr. Mayor, I need to interrupt you.
Okay.
And you moved a little quick for me on the consent agenda. Remember, even the consent agenda, you need to give the public an opportunity to be heard on.
Thank you very much. Anyone like to come forward? All right. Am I okay to ask for a motion now?
Nobody wants to be heard. So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
How do we vote on this, Mrs. Bach?
Just to approve the salaries of the collective bargaining agreement between the city and the Coastal Florida Public Benevolent Association.
Do we need a roll call?
It is not a roll call.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, it passes. We will move on to public hearings, which is 3A. And the first one is an ordinance of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 60 Appendix, definitions of the Code of the City of Vero Beach by creating a definition for community garden. Amend Chapter 64, Article 1, Development Review by creating 6414, Community Gardens, providing procedures and standards for regulating community gardens, amending pertinent sections of Chapter 61, Residential Zoning Districts, Articles 1, 3, 4, and 5 to provide for community gardens as a principal use in residential zoning districts, providing for conflict and severability, providing for an effective date, requested by the Planning and Development Director, and I believe this is the final hearing, is it not, Tim?
Yes, sir. This is your second and last hearing on it. As you recall, at the first hearing on this, the council asked us to look at their these community gardens are allowed to have a storage shed, and the concern that they wanted to have it toward the rear of the property. Well, that's a lot. It was easy to tell me that. There was another thing for Tim to figure out how to do that, because we have a lot of lots that have multiple front yards in it. So we came up with a reasonable solution for that. As you notice, we put language in there. So the worst is the lot. These storage sheds would end up in the middle of the lot. Would be the worst case scenario, or they'd have some room. So that took care of that problem on that. So if you have any questions.
I do.
Yes.
I do. We had talked about exterior lighting and not having exterior lighting where you plugged into a power source, but having some part of solar lighting to deter vandalism, just so in the evenings, if there's someone on the property that shouldn't be there, people can see it. And so I'd like to introduce language to allow that. It would not be in the power. It wouldn't be power. It would just be solar power.
I believe you have some language.
I do have it, actually.
Notice we've talked. That's obvious.
No exterior lighting is permitted except for solar-powered lighting fixtures that are no higher than 1.5 feet above grade.
And that would be 6440 item 10. We would add that additional language. Which
is staff in favor of that?
Staff's in favor of that.
I have no objection.
I move for approval as amended.
Second.
But wait a second. We have to have a public hearing.
We still need the public hearing. That's all right.
Okay, I open a public hearing. Anyone like to speak to this? Yes, there is someone. Come forward, please.
Good morning. My name is Michael Hudon, and I'm the research entomologist for the Indian River Mosquito Control District. We've been following this and are in support of the community gardens. I myself am a lifelong gardener and been a member of various rare fruit councils for about the last 20 years. Having said that, we've been keeping our eye on it to make sure it's done in a way that doesn't impede our ability to protect the public health in the county and or in the district, say. And having read the draft ordinance, it looks like it's fine. It does good, and even has some things in there that we would have put in there, emptying the containers every week, that kind of thing. Is fabulous. So just wanted to say that we've been keeping our eye on it. It looks like it's okay. There's no mention of organic and this kind of stuff in it that you're going to allow people to manage it as they see fit. And I just thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to come forward? Then I'll close public hearing, and I think we've completed council comments, have we not? Anyone want to comment? And then, Ms. Graves, if you could make your motion.
Motion to adopt?
As amended.
As amended.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
No, roll call.
Roll call. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Mr. Fletcher?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Thank you, Council.
Thanks.
Okay, we move on to 4A, resolutions. I'll read the title here. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, expressing support for Senate Bill 356 and House Bill 307, which bill deletes from Section 509.032, Parent 7, Parent, Florida's statutes, restrictions preventing local laws, ordinances, or regulations from regulating the use of vacation rentals based solely on their classification, use, or occupancy, urging the Florida legislature to adopt the legislation and Governor Rick Scott to support and approve the registration, providing for an effective date requested by Mayor Richard Winger. This one requires only one hearing, is that correct?
Yes, this would be the final hearing today.
All right, and on this, do we want staff comments first?
Sure.
Any
up to you.
no staff comments open at the public hearing? Seeing no public hearing, we'll close it. Council comments.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is an issue that was also discussed at the Treasure Coast Regional League of Cities, that many other communities along the Treasure Coast have struggled with this legislation and would be also sending letters or resolutions to support this.
I have a further comment on it, which is if it does pass, the legislative council will meet here later this week. Is it Wednesday, I believe?
Thursday.
Or Thursday. And if this is passed, I will, as an advocate for the city, present it to our legislative people. And I think it's important that you know that. And, of course, I'm in support of it. I think there's an issue here that maybe transcends even this issue. And the issue is, under Florida law, we have the possibility of home rule in all of the 410 cities that are part of Florida have something called home rule. And it says, in addition to the things that were mandated to do by Florida law and by federal law subsequent to that, that we have the ability to regulate our own affairs. It could do with Main Street, it could do with parking, it could do with a great many issues. And I think the bigger issue here is how we regulate our communities and how we deal with our local businesses. Realize that short-term rentals in a residential district not only may be objected to by the neighbors, but they may also be an issue for our hotels, our restaurants, and so on. So what we're really asking here is that we believe that the state has moved beyond what they should do in regard to home rule. We believe this is a power that should be one that is reserved onto the city. Any further comment by the council? That was quite an editorial.
Well, no, I think if anything, we just need to make sure that we continue to support the idea of home rule and reinforce it. I hope that we can send some type of a message to a lot of the other cities that we really can't lay down on the issue when the state comes and tramples over the home rule idea. And with that, I would make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Is this
Roll call, yes, sir.
roll call? Okay.
Mr. Fletcher?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes. Okay, we move to 5A, first readings by title for ordinance and resolutions require a future public hearing. The first one, 5A, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, adopting revised recreation fees for Riverside Racket Complex programs and facilities, adopting recreation fees for certain park pavilions and providing it for an effective date requested by the Recreation Director, and it's up to him to comment at this point.
Again, it's Rob Slezak, Recreation Director. As you can see through Exhibit A and Exhibit B, and thank you, Wayne, for Exhibit B, one of the things that was brought forward at the budget meetings last summer was we had some concerns about generating enough revenue to offset some of the costs for Riverside Tennis. And we had concerned citizens come forward and say they would be willing to pay some more to help offset that cost. So we wanted to step up that procedure and get that out as quickly as possible, bring it back to you guys with rate increases and rate adjustments. We had met with the Recreation Commission, the public-private input. We had a subcommittee discuss these rates as well, and those were our recommendations in regards to the tennis rates. Then Exhibit B, which one is a little bit more controversial, was the double-wide and triple-wide pavilions. We had brought this forward at budget, but it was also a thing that we needed to come up with a bunch of different ideas of what we wanted to do and what we would bring back to you guys. And this is another one of those ideas of trying to generate revenue for the city. And when we discussed the rates with the Recreation Commission, those were the rates that they had recommended that we propose. So that's your Exhibit B.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify that you say revenues for the city. It's revenues for our recreation programs. I was going to say it's not going for other city.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Just want that to be very clear that's what those
right.
are specific for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've got some strong feelings about this, but we'll get that under council comments. I would like to open it to public hearing, please. Seeing no public hearing, I'll close the public hearing. My comments are that I would have to vote no on this if you put both portions of it in. I'm not in favor of raising revenue by renting pavilions, or at least additional pavilions that we already aren't renting. Some of these pavilions were given, and I think if you went back in history, you'd find that the idea was they were given for use by the general public. And if you limit this to the first part, I will vote for it. But if you want to charge for the use of pavilions, I think that's something that I would like to see continue free. So that's my feeling on it. Other council members like to speak to this?
I would like to say I share Mayor Winger's concerns. The park pavilion rates, usually people who are in the pavilions are celebrating children's birthday parties or end-of-season parties for soccer teams or baseball teams, and some of these rates would be above the budget they'd spend on their entire party with the food included. So I think it would be prohibitive to a lot of people to enjoy those pavilions.
Mr. Miff, I might like a question on projected revenue on both for Exhibit A and for Exhibit B.
Exhibit A about 15 to 20,000, and Exhibit B we're thinking in the same ballpark.
That's significant on Exhibit B. Okay.
Yeah, I would think so. If you're looking at 50 to 70, and we have 17 of them, and you do, let's just go one a week. You do those, it would get you up to $20-some thousand. But conservatively, I would go more with that lower number of 15 to 20 to start.
Thank you.
Are there further comments? And I'd make a motion.
Mr. Mayor, this is first reading, so if you don't want to make any changes to it today, you could certainly do that at public hearing.
I would make a motion that we bifurcate this and take off the second portion of it.
I'll second that.
How do we vote on that, or do we need to vote?
It's a roll call vote.
Okay.
So what we're voting on is bifurcating. In other words, we would be dropping the paid pavilion Part B.
Part 2, yeah.
Well, we don't need a roll call. We just...
Yeah, you do.
Well, no, I was going to say we don't need a roll call to separate the issue. We separate the issue, and then we make a motion on each one of the different issues.
Or you can just move it to public hearing on just at Exhibit A and just delete. That could be one motion.
Or motion as amended to only include A.
Mrs. Bach, you're the parliamentary.
Can you tell us what we're voting on?
I would suggest amending the motion to make it a little clear that you are voting on the resolution to move to a public hearing, deleting Exhibit B.
I'll modify my motion to said motion.
A second.
Mr. Fletcher?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Thank you.
On that note, though, however, can Exhibit B then be brought forward on its own?
Of course.
Yeah, I would like some clarification if there are certain pavilions that have some restrictions on them because of donations.
I think what we would be doing here is not charging except for the maintenance and operation. People are not paying for the pavilion. What they're doing is paying for the upkeep and the operation of that pavilion. So it's not like, for example, in some of our park grants with limitations.
Well, in Ms. Turner's comment, if you wanted to bring back Exhibit B, we're going to have to do another resolution, and that'll take another first reading.
Okay.
But this one is going to go to public hearing.
That's at the pleasure of City Council.
I think we were okay with bifurcating it. I think we do that.
Right.
And this,
yes, I would like to see it brought back as a separate resolution for dealing with the park.
Would you bring it forward then, please?
Certainly.
Okay, well, if the council's direction is to do another resolution for just Exhibit B, we can do that, and then we'll modify this resolution to only include Exhibit A.
Right.
And Tammy, what would that public hearing date be?
It would be on January 17th, 2014.
And it'll be first reading on Exhibit B then for that day because it would not have been seen before. Or actually, I mean, you're seeing them both today, so what we can do is bring them both back. We'll just split the resolution. You've heard the subject matter on both. Okay. So you'll have them both for public hearing.
Right.
I don't think that'll be a problem.
Mrs. Bach, I believe the floor is yours at this point.
I am just bringing the High-Speed Rail Commission applications back to council. We had them come forth a couple months ago, and you asked me to see if we can get some more applications. We did receive one more application, and just bringing them back to see if council wants to move forward.
How many individuals do we need to choose?
Actually 5 full members and 2 alternate members. And Mr. Rusty Roberts, he realizes that he does not live in Indian River County, so he would be a non-voting representative, and we would just send him notices of the meeting so he knows that he can attend.
Mrs. Bach, is it not true that if we had 5 full members, we can move forward with this? We can let the alternates go in later. In other words,
yes,
there's
sir.
no necessity to vote for all 7 people on here. You should vote for the ones that you believe would be the best representative of the city.
Yes, sir, we can move forward. It's up to council.
So are you wanting us to vote for 5 members for...
Either vote yes or no, I believe is what you're saying.
Right,
each
I did
person.
pass out the High-Speed Commission applicants form for you to vote on. And if you'd like to vote on that now and pass it back, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that everybody's had a chance to review the applications.
And while we're waiting on that, may I ask, Ms. Watt, we still have two commissions where we haven't received the appointees, and that's Finance and P&Z as well?
Actually, I have talked to Amelia, and she has her appointee, and I know that Mayor Winger is still working on his.
And I will make appointments to the finance before the next city council meeting.
Great, thank you. And just one other issue. This meeting coming after, I guess, the holiday weekend, our agenda items were required the day before. And this kind of came as quite a surprise to this council member, since I hadn't been informed of that and just learned of it by chance.
And
in the event we have any of these changes of agenda items, dates,
that will happen with the next item too, because of the New Year holiday. But I will make sure that I give something in writing to the council on that.
Or that everybody is informed of it equally. Thank you.
Mrs. Bach, do you have results, or do we need them now?
I've only got three tabulations.
There were 5.
It looks like all of the applicants have been voted on and will be members on the board.
Great. Thank you.
They each received 3 votes is how we determine that.
All right, Mr. O'Connor.
The first item is a request from Main Street. Each member of council should have received a copy of the letter of request asking us seeking city support for a special act. This applies to about 7 cities. What it allows is for nonprofit liquor permit exceptions. Right now it's limited under state law to 3. This would allow it to go to 15. And our Main Street, as you know, does the Friday nights and other activities, and it allows them to obtain those permits. They have defined the area of downtown, which is typical of what we have done. And so administratively, we are requesting your support for this. We think it's a good idea for Main Street. And if you have no objections, if I'm hearing no objections from the council, we will proceed in support of this.
Is there also any comment from the public about this? Okay, go ahead, Jay.
I would just make a motion to support it. I think it would be good to have an actual vote of the council to show support.
I will second.
Okay.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes.
We will allow the Main Street to voice that in the legislative meeting coming up on Thursday.
That was a unanimous approval, just to make sure that you can use that.
Jim, I have a further matter for you, and other city council members may also. I'd like an update on where we are on the diesel plant.
Yesterday, we our countersuit. As you know, we sent evictions notices to the tenants a couple of weeks ago, and then there was a suit filed by the tenants, and which initiated all of this. Sort of in sequence, the council considered a tolling agreement, which we all passed, and then for some reason there was a suit filed on the 1st of November. We have filed for eviction notice, and in the meantime had a couple of meetings with our tenants, tried to work out some differences. We were not successful at that point, and so we have filed the counterclaim now to go through the court processes. Wayne, if you have any comments.
Yeah, the last proposition that they had brought to Jim and I and our outside counsel, Mr. Gene O'Neill, basically was still, we didn't think it was in the realm of being any possibility that the council would be agreeable to it. So we basically, Mr. O'Neill has tendered back to them a position that Jim and I could support. However, we have not heard as to any response to that proposal. So we did, because of datelines and what have you, we did agree with Gene that we'd go ahead and file the countersuit, protect the city's interests.
Under the Sunshine Law, I have to reveal that I also attended that meeting, and I concur with what Wayne said.
We will continue any discussion that the other party wants to have, but the court process will follow through.
Are you done?
I
have another item for Mr.
Go ahead,
O'Connor,
Ms. Stern.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connor, back in, I guess, May 7th, had put in a request and followed that up again in September with a response to information on our nitrogen loading for the lagoon. The follow-up letter I received in September shows December 6th as a date for tasks 1 and 2, which was determining our current average annual loading rate for nutrients in the stormwater outfalls, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus, and comparing those to an FDEP model. Just wanted to confirm that we are on schedule to have those items delivered on the 6th.
Yes, ma'am, we are on schedule as I understand right now, but we will get a report out or something to you on the 6th pertaining to those loading levels.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mr. Mutcher.
Mark Mutcher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. This has to do with Mr. Winger's question of the city manager, and I'm going to take off my septic tank hat and put my taxpayer's hat on. Could you give just a brief explanation of why we require outside counsel for this diesel plant issue?
What we were looking for is expertise, and our city attorney may have to address this, but expertise in the land use and litigation pertaining to landlord-tenant disputes.
And quite honestly, resources and staffing, we just don't have the people to do it anymore.
Okay. It's not that you don't have that skill set, but you're doing other things?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Mr. Mutcher. Are there further questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to city council members. Seeing no old business, we'll go to new business. The first one is 9B1, and I am submitting it. It is titled Replace Code Enforcement Board with a Magistrate, requested by myself. The summary of points for your discussion, and this is a streamlined approach, and it's supported by staff, and I will let staff to defend it. I will not. I'm making this request basically because I believe it's a good approach and it's supported by staff. Any increased costs will be built into code enforcement fines and fees. In effect, we'd have a lawyer adjudicate, and under 2-276 Code Enforcement Board, Section 2-277, we already allow for a special magistrate. That would probably be all there is, except I draw your attention to the code. In other words, this is an alternate that is allowed rather than having a code enforcement board. I'll ask for staff comment, please.
Just as Tim's coming to the microphone, one of the benefits that we see in it is streamlining the process, and we looked at trying to bifurcate the process in order to send some, because we have a lot of them that have little or no time involved, but that would become very cumbersome. But Tim?
Yes, I'll brief. The mayor's already touched on a few things, just so you understand. Special magistrates used in many municipalities throughout Florida. In fact, I'm very familiar. I had one in Monroe County, in the county there. Basically, as the mayor pointed out, the person acts as an administrative law judge. Rather than having a board of 7 individuals such as we have, you have an administrative law judge who acts on the case and handles the hearings and renders the order. Basically, in these kind of things that you hire, we normally look for a lawyer that has a certain amount of experience. I think we have it in our code 5 years. I can't remember right now. Preferably with somebody who has a municipal land use or administrative law experience. generally, their fees paid like $150 an hour, or it could be based on the hearing and all that. But as pointed out, some of these costs certainly could be recovered through the administrative costs that the individuals applying or before the board must pay. The advantage of this, based on the experience of other communities, have shown that the decisions by the special magistrate are generally more consistent based on facts and conclusions of law than citizens boards. And generally, you have to look at citizens boards. You may not have the same members showing up all the time. You have a lot of inconsistency in that. And therefore, a lot of these communities have found that you end up in more consistent decisions made and more legally defensible decisions that are made on this. It eliminates the need for the city attorney to be acting as legal counsel. And I think that's big. We ran into a situation here, the city council, due to his position as counsel to the board, couldn't represent the city, and he was caught in a conflict. In this case, where we've had these situations, the city attorney would not be the counsel to this, but could also be used in our code enforcement. Right now, he cannot be prosecutor. It's our code enforcement staff that does that. Of course, there have to be changes in our code to allow this kind of thing, but that's a benefit out of this. And that would also free the city attorney up for other duties, though he's still being involved in the process. The other thing it eliminates in our city is we've had a problem having full membership on the Code Enforcement Board. Now, I don't know how many we're short now, but we run into problems. I know they've had a couple meetings had to be canceled because we didn't have a quorum at these meetings. So that eliminates that. The disadvantages, it does create some out-of-pocket costs. Some of the cases we point are pretty straightforward. The person doesn't show up, you fine them, you go through the process. That's why some communities do the hybrid approach, and our ordinance right now has both a code enforcement board and we could do a special master. I think, as based on our look at it, that from the staff standpoint, we feel a special master to do a straight approach on this. It gets rid of the conflicts you get into that kind of thing, and also so it gives you the full value of what a special magistrate can bring to the city. And it eliminates any possibility that the city could be accused of directing certain cases to the administrative law judge, as well as not going to the code enforcement board. So I think those are some of the things that come out of that type of thing. But it is, it will require changes in our code.
Why don't you hang loose for a minute, and I think we'll run through the open public hearing, then we'll come to...
Well, I've got some comments, too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question, actually, as well.
Why don't you make your comments first, then, Wayne?
Unless it needs to go.
No.
Okay. Well, and basically, Ms. Graves had asked me about some different things, and so you should have in front of you, as a result of her questions, we put together some materials. For one thing, Sherry Philo in the clerk's office, who is the clerk to the Code Enforcement Board, was kind enough to go. I just asked her to go back 3 years, and we basically have a breakdown there of the amount of time that was actually incurred by the Code Enforcement Board over those 3 years. I mean, there's some minutes as short as some meetings as short as 2 minutes, and some are longer because of very preliminary things to be dealt with. Then the second page attached to that should be the citation appeal requests that were actually filed by violators. In 2011, there was 3. Only one of them ended up actually having a hearing. 2012, there was 3 requests filed. There was only one actually had a hearing. And then 2013, there was 3 requests filed, and again, only one actually had a contested hearing. In 2013, we also had 1 notice of assessment that was appealed, and that actually was kind of straightened out without a full-blown hearing. And let me just add, while we're talking about the current code board, I do, because of my experience with the code board, I've continued to represent the code board in all their meetings, and that's really the height of my involvement. We do work with the code officers from time to time with procedural matters. As far as actual enforcement issues, I mean, that is Mr. McGarry is their supervisor. and of course the police department, they deal with things on their own. And again, we would help them procedurally. The other thing you received, I did an unscientific survey through one of my listservs with local attorneys, and we came up with 15 or 20 different cities and got a breakdown of what they have, either a code board or a magistrate, or a few of them have both. And so I'll let you look at that for yourself. There are different ways to deal with a magistrate on an hourly basis. Some are paid a lump sum. There's one that was paid a lump sum for 2.5 hours of hearings, and there was so much an hour after that. There were none that said they had unpaid volunteer magistrates. These are professionals. They're going to be licensed attorneys, and typically they're going to be paid to expend their time. It's interesting, Clearwater, they have a code board, but they're adding a magistrate only because of the red light camera ordinance and those violations. Their code board is just getting overwhelmed with appeals on those red light violations. So they're adding a magistrate just to deal with those violations. And just so you know, a little background, you may or may not remember if you weren't here at the time, but the city adopted its own code enforcement process. We opted out of Chapter 162 Florida statutes, which is a little bit more cumbersome process. We use a citation process, which is more streamlined. It actually typically, I think Tim would agree, gets cases resolved quicker, typically. Because it's kind of just this happens, then that happens, then that happens. It's all laid out in the code. It's not dependent upon going before the code board or a magistrate. A lot of the things kind of happen automatically. They may have to go for, yes, go ahead and issue that notice, things like that. But it is much streamlined, so it's pretty much all of the cities and counties, as far as I know, are still using Chapter 162. So they haven't adopted their own process like we have. We do have that hybrid. I would agree with Tim. Magistrate would be more consistency, so long as you have that same magistrate and they're looking at the same law. The good thing about magistrates, they do know due process because they are attorneys. They know how to make sure each side gets their rights protected. And remember, in a code case, there's two parties. One is the city, and the other is the violator or the alleged violator. So they both need to be treated fairly, whether it's the city or the violator. So in that respect, not that our code board has in the past not given anybody their due process rights, but that is one of the things that certainly on appeal to court they look at. That's one of the issues they have to look at. The only issue I see with right now, the way the code is written, we do provide legal counsel and advice to also magistrates under the current code. Starting out, probably, especially if because of our hybrid system, the magistrate may still need some guidance. If I was to go from advising the code board or a magistrate to prosecuting cases, that would definitely increase my workload as far as prosecution of cases. I don't envision having the resources really to do that. If I was taken out of the loop from the magistrate, I could certainly advise the officers in their prosecution, but as far as actually having to prepare cases and present them, I don't honestly believe that's doable with our current staffing, because it would take much more work than what I'm involved with now with the code board.
Well, what I meant on that, if we had a high-profile case, it would be good to have the attorney there. I wouldn't see the attorney.
Something like that.
That vacation rental case is a high-profile.
Yeah, and it's something like that. We would definitely be working, with the officers. But to be there every meeting and presenting every case, I don't see that happening. And keep in mind, too, in 3 years we've had 3 actual contested hearings. So there's not a lot. And that's why we had talked about the hybrid situation where, well, maybe just contested case would go to the magistrate, but an attorney you're going to hire, they're going to want some kind of minimum. What I found in corresponding with other cities was if they have the fewer cases they have, typically the more they pay per hour, because the magistrate may not be there for 3 hours and may only be there 30 minutes. So they typically will want a minimum. And one thing that can be done, I mean, you can ask for RFPs for the position for an independent contractor to do this, or we could just advertise at a certain rate and see who is interested at that rate. The 19th Judicial Circuit is doing that right now for a traffic magistrate. They've just set the amount that would be paid and per hour, and that's it. And they're taking applications as an independent contractor. So there's a couple different ways we could do it if you want to try to control what you end up having to pay, rather than just a proposal to be submitted by several different proponents.
Before we open this public comment, since we've got a discussion of council and staff, do we want to continue that? Who would like the floor, please?
I certainly have a few questions here,
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor. Going back to selection, that was how this magistrate would be selected. I appreciate you giving us some options there, Mr. Comment on that. And that final selection would come back to council?
Oh, absolutely. You have to appoint the magistrate. Yes. And you could potentially have 2, maybe an alternate also in case, one was unavailable a particular day.
Obviously, my main concern with this, it seems like we're being very reactive to one case, one problem that we had with this board, a contentious decision about the rental area, and that we are this is a knee-jerk reaction to that. I'm also concerned that if we're going to be covering the cost of this attorney, that we may increase the fees for appealing such a point that your average citizen will not be able to appeal anymore.
Well, you can't charge to appeal. That's a right that you can't charge for. But if they lose after the appeal, you can assess the cost. The cost can be assessed against it.
Once again, I still think that maybe putting it out of your average person to be able to. We have had a citizens board for how long? Have we handled
since
this?
Before Tammy?
Yeah, I was going to say, and it has seemed to have worked well, and that's all I say.
I would agree with Ms. Turner. I like the fact that the citizens are the ones that make the decision, the people who live and work here. I don't want to make it any more complex, and I'm nothing against attorneys, but
no offense taken.
I'll stand with the board as we have it. It's worked over 50 years. I'm going to leave it that way.
All right, Mr. Wilson, would you like to comment, please?
Good morning, Council. I apologize for not being at the earlier meeting. I was over at the county, and their meetings are at the same time. And since the county occasionally has been known to declare war on cities, I like to keep a real close watch on them, even though the meetings are at the same time. My name is Charles Wilson, P.O. Box 651114, Vero Beach, Florida. I am a city resident. The reason I think what we all want is we want it to be the most fair and efficient way of accomplishing what we're trying to do. And I don't know that I object to a magistrate, except that, and I know if I were a cynical person, I would look at this agenda and say, if this is the Empire Strikes Back, because we're taking on salary increases, we're taking on the Code Enforcement Board, we're taking on the Utilities Authority. Now, having said that, I understand that elections have consequences, and to the winner goes the spoils. That's part of working in elections. But I do question in this particular case, I think we want it to be the most efficient and the most cost efficient as well as fair way of doing it. If the motive is that, then it is a fair discussion. If the motive is revenge one, then that's probably not a good discussion. I understand why this would be placed. The problem that I see is that, as Councilman Fletcher says, you're removing the citizens again. We're going to a point where we're going strictly by the law, and I've watched code enforcement, and sometimes code enforcement, you've got 65-year-old person coming up here because their lawn got too big, and yeah, she broke the law, but the code enforcement board can say, Helen, can you get somebody to mow your lawn? But if you're at a lawyer, he's going to say, you broke the law, off with your head. And that is the strength of a citizen-based code enforcement board. And I'm not so sure that we don't need some citizens, despite what we may be reacting to as one case that has some controversy about it. And I know Mr. McGarry would much rather argue with somebody who is a planner, than to have to actually explain this to people who are just citizens. And it would be easier for him. But I'm not sure that's a good reason. And so I urge you, when did we start thinking about this? I mean, it just kind of appeared after the election, after a controversy election where the Code Enforcement Board was a central force. And now we're going to change 50 years of history. What happened to keep Vero Vero? The Code Enforcement Board has been one of those citizen boards that have helped Vero Beach for 50 years. So have we really thought this through? And I don't know. If you're planning on taking a vote today to change 50 years of history because the election was last week, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Perhaps you might want to refer something like this to the Charter Review that you're thinking about having. That might be a good place to have a discussion when you're looking at the entire governance of the city of Vero Beach. But I urge you, this is not a time for us to be ugly and settle scores. If that's what this is about, then this is the wrong thing to do. If it's about efficiency and it's a better way to do it, okay. But I'm not so sure that it is, and I appreciate your listening to me.
Is there further comment from the public? Mr. Daigle.
All right. Thank you. Ken Daig, 1846, 21st Avenue. Excuse me. On this issue, you have been discussing the code board situation. It's also been brought up here. The seats are hard to fill on the code board. Sometimes you have people that are absent. They can't move forward with their hearings. Sitting on the code board, that is a hard job. Now, at times when we've come in here, if you go back in our past, it is difficult for the code board sometimes to follow through with the rules and regulations of the city because it does become political. We've had in our neighborhood and some other neighborhoods some severe code violations over the years, and I'm not going to go through that today. And because the landlords were recognized folk throughout the community, it was very, very difficult to follow through with the rules and regulations. Everybody knows everybody here. And so for a number of years, a lot of us had to suffer through where these folks were not fully prosecuted under the law that we have today. So going forward, if you choose not to do this process with a special master, you maybe need to take a look at your code board as it sits now to maybe help them a little bit more with their mission. What is their mission statement? And also clarity of the codes when the codes come before them. I've sat in on some of the code board hearings, and sometimes it's very difficult for just regular people that sit up on that dais to follow through. They give their time, they work very hard. But now, on the receiving end, where we've had to put up with years of severe violations, because it does get political, we would need some help with that. So if you choose not to take any action today, I understand. I'll follow up with some information to you to perhaps help you with your decisions in the future to maybe tighten up our code board a little bit to help them out when some of these hardcore cases come in with landlord violations. That's mainly what I'm talking about. Not talking about where a senior citizen has their lawn too high or whatever. Our city, to my knowledge, has never dropped a hammer on anyone. They would actually work it through where somebody could go out to help that person or whatever. And our code board has been understanding. So it's not that. It's not a little high grass. It's these other issues that come up that are pretty difficult. And Mr. McGarry knows that it's very difficult because it's a lot of housing codes. You can't step on their toes. You can't do this. You can't do that. And then here's the neighborhoods. We're stuck with the slops. Again, I'm not going to go into the stuff that we've had to put up with over the years that we've been fighting for. It's not nice. So I'll just leave that over on this side. So anyway, just bear that in mind as you go further with your discussion. Thank you.
Further public comment. I'll close the public comment. Ms. Stradley, come forward, please.
Thank you very much. Scott Stradley, 1797 14th Avenue. When I first looked at the backup, I thought this was a good idea. For all the reasons that the staff came forward with, consistency and everything. But then as I'm listening here today and I'm hearing about retainers and rate per hour, and I guess I sort of imagined that it would be and forgive me for my imagination, be maybe perhaps a volunteer attorney retired that would do this. We have serious financial issues, and we've been working real hard at saving money. So I would, based on that, I think I would be in favor of keeping the Code Enforcement Board and keeping the same system going forward because it's basically at no cost to the city. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further public? Seeing no comment, I'll close it. Since I brought this forward. First of all, let me assure you that I brought it forward because it's a better way of doing it and because it's supported by staff, both the city manager and Tim, and I believe you also, Wayne. So, we're trying to do something in a better, more efficient way. There is no additional cost for this because it's part of the system that you build into it. I also have real difficulty with the concept of overruling. We have to realize the city council and the mayor, for that matter, too, are merely legislators. I'll get the word correctly. And that the city is actually run by the city manager and the two other constitutional or charter officers, the city clerk and the city attorney. And I have difficulty in thinking that I rarely will want to overrule their opinion. This is their opinion. And to overrule it, to me, smacks of politics. In other words, the politicians know better than the people that run the city. And I, for myself, don't think that's true. So I'll stand by this request, and I'll stand by voting on it.
Mr. Mayor, if I might. Once again, we were talking about the items that these Code Enforcement Board reviews. My husband was one of the volunteers on the Code Enforcement Board. Before I came into office, he was then forced to resign that appointment. But many of the items that they discussed were personal to our citizens, such as the 6-inch variance on a property being able to extend over to building. You give this to an attorney. Granted, 6 inches is out of the code, but where are you going to get that variance approval? We're taking away that personal touch to it. You're saying that this would be independent magistrate. Well, if he's getting a paycheck from the city, he's got loyalty to where his paycheck comes from. So I think we're not getting that unbiased, opinion that we're being sold here. And I would rather leave it in the hands of our citizens.
All right. Any further comment from council?
My only question would be if we went forward with this, when someone applied, how would they disclose conflicts of interest, and then who would be in their position if someone came forward that they were in business with or had a financial interest with?
Are you talking about a magistrate?
Right, a magistrate.
Yeah, they're basically under the same conflict type rules that you are, or a board would be, board members would be. That's why if you went with a magistrate, you'd probably want to have an alternate too that you have under contract in case you do come up with a conflict.
I still like the personal texture of citizens and residents doing this. I don't want to put it in the hands of an attorney.
I would have a tendency to agree. I always kind of come back to the premise of a government by the people, or for the people, by the people. However, I look at the attendances, and I do see if you're after efficiency, we've got times where people's cases were canceled due to a lack of a quorum. quite frankly, the politics can go either way. I mean, politics will infiltrate any type of arrangement that you put out there. I guess it's just a matter of how the council wants to execute the process.
And we do have a hybrid in place. Get a magistrate so that if we didn't have a quorum, they could show up that day and do it, and we could keep moving forward.
That's true.
But then you'd have to pay the magistrate a retainer, and that was going to affect the fee structures for the appeals.
The only other thing I could add is, and Sherry would probably remember better than me, my failing memory, but many code board meetings, nobody shows up. It's just the code board and the officers going through the cases. Unless it's contested or everyone always gets a notice of any hearing that is going to come before the board, no matter what the subject is and where it is in the process. So some people do show up, even if they've already technically admitted a violation, and of course they're heard. But because we just don't have the volume, especially contested cases that larger cities have, you really don't have a lot of people show up. And I know Mr. Fletcher is here in many of those meetings, and he knows that just often there's not many people here.
I also served for 4 years on the code enforcement, and was it cumbersome sometimes? Yes, it was, but it's the citizens doing their work. I'd like to keep it that way.
And I think one of the problems with the attendance at the code enforcement boards is that we don't have any regular meeting, or if we had set up maybe even on a quarterly basis that, we would have a regular meeting unless there's nothing to be heard. I mean, many times, like I said, when my husband served on it, he didn't know when there was going to be a meeting, and that there wasn't.
We're always the second Wednesday of the month.
Second Wednesday of the month.
Yeah. And they're canceled if there's not a quorum or there's nothing to be heard.
But once again, the notice to the members could be improved, and I think that would help with attendance.
Mr. McGarry, would you like to comment?
The only thing I want to add, if we do have the hybrid in place, but I believe we would have to make a few changes to even make if you wanted to use a special master.
We even talked about asking the local bar if anybody did want to volunteer their time to be a magistrate. After doing my unscientific survey, I found nobody that has they've even been able to begin to get volunteers, because you are asking for professional. Magistrates are used throughout the state of Florida for traffic, for marital cases in court, and they even have magistrates hearing foreclosures now because of just the volume of work. They don't have enough judges to do everything, so they would appoint magistrates. And like I said, there are advantages.
I was just pointing out to make it viable hybrid. If you wanted to have that, it looks like we would have to make some changes to the code just to be able to get a special magistrate.
When the original ordinance was adopted, we did put in there provide for magistrates. It does say they're volunteers, unless otherwise provided by the council. We added that little tweak just in case the council hired somebody at a specific rate or something. It does provide that they have to be residents of the city. We would probably need to remove that so that you could expand your market.
Just from the administration, if we're going to bifurcate, we prefer to stay like we are. You have that option. If something does come up, the council could appoint a magistrate at that particular time for that particular issue. But instead of Tim and I trying to figure out who goes in front of the code board and who goes to the magistrate, I just keep it like it is.
That's too cumbersome.
I tell you what, I would entertain one of two motions. One motion would be to approve it, which would have to be seconded. The second one would be to table it, which would also have to be seconded and bring back at a later date.
Well, I'll make a third. I'll make a motion to retain the system we currently have.
And that's a valid motion.
And I second that.
Just as a I'd like to see if there was that, like we mentioned, the hybrid thing. Because if we've got people that come to the code enforcement board and they've got issues that need to be resolved and nobody shows up, it would be nice to have a backup so that somebody could step in and get the issue resolved.
Well, you don't know that you don't have a quorum until they show up. That's the trouble. There's no way to schedule it because someone doesn't show up.
And if you review the average issue that is reviewed by these boards, there are really nothing that's that earth-shattering, that would,
Well, I mean, some of these fees that we've assessed are higher than $50. I mean, some of them are $15,000. So I would definitely want someone with expertise talking to me before I paid $15,000 fee. So I think,
and those people have an attorney that comes with them.
Yes, and it can certainly be appealed to the council afterwards, Ms. Gray.
Yeah,
well, seeing there's a motion on the floor to retain the current system, and seeing it's second, I'm going to call the motion.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed. What did we get?
3-2.
Well, we have in Florida, everyone has to vote. So do you want to call a roll, Tammy?
Mr. Fletcher?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
No.
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
No.
Mayor Winger?
No.
If I could just make a comment, I mean, I'm not opposed to the current system. I do see that there are some weaknesses into it, and I'd just like to see those weaknesses covered.
I'd like the motion so we can explore the hybrid a little bit more, table it, come back to it.
I'll second it.
Well, what exactly would you like us to bring back? I mean,
Well,
she
just
can work with you.
How would the hybrid work so that we could have a magistrate on call if we needed them, rather than having one?
The problem is
some of the bigger
you're
cases.
dealing with attorneys, and if they don't schedule something ahead, if they're worth their salt, they're busy. Yeah. They're liable to be in court or in a hearing, in a deposition. You may not be able to get them if it's just for standby. You may not get anybody that's interested to just be a standby. Mr. Wilson may have an idea.
I just have a question, Counsel. How much is the fine that we're doing? It's $50. Most of them are $50 or $100. Is that right?
I mean, they vary.
But you have continuing
Except for
fines as well.
So perhaps you could use a dollar figure to go from a code enforcement to a special magistrate. But the real point is that we're getting to. I just left the county commission where the reason I was there was to point out to them that they were charging $18,000 to appeal a $6,000 fee. And I see us heading in the same direction. That when we say it doesn't cost anything, it doesn't cost you anything, but it costs the public something. And so we're going to end up where you get a fine for $50, and what you're going to do is just take it. You know, whether it's real or not, whether it's correct or not, because you don't have any. You're going to go before a magistrate and you're going to talk to a lawyer, and the lawyer's going to say, that's the rule, tough luck. So you're going to have people. That means you can give out fines from here until the day after tomorrow, and nobody can actually have a workable appeal. So that was my question. I really, are we, never mind.
Let me just up further. One hybrid is Orange County, where they have a board and they have a magistrate. What they do is they pay the magistrate $145 an hour, and the magistrate gets the contested cases, complex, or new issues. They do not deal with the mundane. And again, because of our system and the way it works, probably 9 out of 10 violators never even show up. So they're not even standing here. Their case is just dealt with because they've never appealed, they've never requested a hearing. The board just issues an order, and you're done. That's why you have some very short meetings.
You know, we've tabled this. Hey, if a hybrid approach doesn't work, we'll just accept the way we've been doing it and move on. Let's just bring it back next time around.
I think where we are is we have a motion for a hybrid approach, and it has been seconded, and I think the motion was made by Ms. Graves. I think we should do exactly what you said, Jay. In other words, she should work with
if it doesn't
the attorney
work out, we'll just
and
go
bring it back.
Okay.
So we're voting on that now.
Wait, I'd like a clarification of the motion first, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say, because I'm not exactly sure what it's to
Did you make the motion, Ms. Graves?
Yes.
I did. I made a motion for the hybrid system, and similar to Orange County, where you have contested complex or new issues, so that, I mean, you know ahead of time if it's going to be a complex or new issue. So we would be able to tell them this date, this issue is.
So your motion is to create a hybrid.
To work with Wayne in what a hybrid would look like.
To bring forward.
Bring something for you to look at.
Okay. Just trying to make sure I understand the motion.
And that would really just be in the administration, a request. For example, take a contested case where person wants to contest their citation, they have to, within 10 days of the citation, provide that request to the clerk's office. Once they get that, the clerk's office would just schedule it with the magistrate rather than with the code board. I mean, there's really no change to the code for that other than the tweaking about who can be a magistrate. Now, keep in mind, in that hybrid system, I'm still going to be the attorney for the code board and thereby could also advise the magistrate, but I could not prosecute or help the prosecution because I'm still conflicted out in that sense. So it doesn't help Tim in that matter in a complex case.
Well, as I understand it, we have a motion and a second, and I'm going to call the motion in, but I'm going to say the effect of calling the motion is it has to come back to City Council with the hybrid. And at that point, it can be voted down or it can go wherever it will go. So I think, we are where we are. So, Mrs. Bach, do you want to call the roll?
Mr. Fletcher?
No.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
No.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Passes 3-2.
Okay, we're at 12:22. We're going to begin to get into the subject having to do with the reserving of land, charters, dogs, that sort of thing. I think that's going to take a protracted period of time. I would like to suggest to City Council that we adjourn till 1:30, but it's only a suggestion. If you want to press on, I'm willing to do so.
I would concur.
You concur?
It's not going to be a short issue.
Okay, we stand adjourned until 1:30